All right, so today we're going depth on a pretty major figure in the history of philosophy.
Yeah.
Someone known as the second master.
Oh, wow.
Abu Nasr Al-Farabi.
Al-Farabi, yeah.
From the late 9th to mid-10th century.
That's right.
And for anyone who's, really trying to understand how Western thought developed.
Absolutely.
This guy is absolutely crucial because he didn't just translate Aristotle.
Right.
He actually, synthesized.
Yeah, he went beyond that.
And expanded on those ideas
Yeah.
in ways that would really affect people who came after him.
Yeah, people like Avicenna.
Right, like Avicenna. And so today we're going to look at a couple of different aspects of his work that are pretty intertwined. His psychology, how he understood the soul,
Right.
and then also his epistemology.
Of course.
How he thought that we come to know things.
Yeah, so we've got a really great set of works to guide us through this.
Yeah.
We've got the principles of existing things.
Oh, cool.
Which is also known as the political regime, the principles and opinions of the people of the virtuous city.
Nice.
The treatise on the intellect.
Yeah.
The book of demonstration. And the book on the conditions of certitude.
Wow. That's a lot to dig into.
Yeah, we've got quite the landscape ahead of us.
Yeah, it's going to be a journey.
It is.
But I think it's important to start with this idea that Al-Farabi's understanding of the soul and of knowledge didn't just come out of thin air.
Yeah.
It was really embedded in this bigger cosmological framework. Everything was kind of interconnected for him.
Yeah.
And he had this hierarchical structure emanating from a single ultimate source.
That's right. Everything flows from the top down.
So let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
What was his take on, the origin and the nature of the soul?
Well, so he starts with a definition.
Okay.
And it really echoes Aristotle.
Okay.
Viewing the soul as the form or the actualization of a natural organic body that has the potential for life. Okay. So it's that principle that kind of animates a living organism.
Yeah.
And lets it do all of its characteristic functions.
Right.
And from there, he goes on to outline a whole hierarchy of faculties that are inherent in living beings.
Okay.
So first you've got the nutritive faculty, which is all about growth and sustenance.
Keeping things going.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Then you've got the sensitive faculty, which allows us to interact with the outside world through our senses.
Yeah.
Then you've got the appetitive faculty.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what drives our desires and our aversions.
Right.
And then finally, and this is what makes us unique as humans, we've got the rational faculty.
Okay, so we have all of those levels, all of those capabilities of life.
Yeah.
But then how does that framework of the soul fit into the bigger cosmological picture that you were talking about?
That emanationist model.
Yeah.
So this is where the blend of Neoplatonic and Aristotelian thought gets super interesting.
Okay.
He imagined a universe that kind of emanates or flows from a first existent.
Okay.
And this first existent is a perfect, eternal, uncaused, and totally immaterial intellect.
Okay.
So you can see the connection there to Aristotle's unmoved mover.
Yeah.
But it's also got that Neoplatonic sense of overflowing being.
Oh, interesting.
And from this ultimate principle comes a series of second intellects.
Okay.
Each a little bit further away in perfection.
Right.
Leading to the active or agent intellect.
Okay.
And all of these initial principles are separate and immaterial.
So imagine this cascade of existence coming from ultimate perfection.
Yeah.
But where do matter and the soul fit into that scheme?
Okay, so then the next three principles.
Yeah.
The soul, form, and matter.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are directly involved with the physical world. Yeah. So Al-Farabi explains that matter originates from prime matter.
Okay.
Which is generated by the celestial spheres.
Okay.
In their eternal motion.
Okay.
And then this prime matter gives rise to the four elements.
Right.
Fire,
water, earth, air.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then those combine to form all the bodies we see.
Oh, wow.
Minerals, plants, animals.
Uh-huh.
And at the top, rational animal.
Humans.
That's us, yeah.
So the soul being the form of the body, does that mean that it's bound to the physical?
Right.
And then would perish with it?
Yeah, so that's in line with the Aristotelian concept of hylomorphism.
Hylomorphism.
Yeah, the idea that matter and form can't be separated.
Okay.
So think about like a statue made of bronze.
Okay.
The bronze is the matter.
Right.
The shape is the form.
Uh-huh.
They're distinct.
Yeah.
But they're totally linked.
Yeah.
So in the same way, the soul is initially dependent on the body.
Okay.
But this is important.
Okay.
Al-Farabi argued that the rational part of the human soul has the potential to become so perfect
Wow.
that it can actually exist without the body as an eternal intellect.
Oh.
So it's like a transcendence of the material.
So it's like a claim for the immortality of the human intellect.
Yeah.
But let's get into the soul itself, because you were talking about all these different capacities.
The faculties.
Yeah.
So at the bottom, we have the nutritive faculty,
Okay.
which is responsible for the basic stuff, growth, sustenance.
Yeah.
And then building on that are the external senses,
Okay.
the 5 ways we perceive the world.
Right.
Above that is the appetitive faculty,
Yeah.
which governs our desires and aversions.
Okay.
Then we have the imaginative faculty,
Yeah.
which is super active and important.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not just recording sensations.
Okay.
It keeps them around,
Uh-huh.
combines them,
Which
divides them, even without the original stimuli.
Oh, wow.
And then at the very top is the rational or intellective faculty,
Yeah.
which makes humans special.
So that imaginative faculty seems like a lot more than just a place to store sensory data.
Totally. It's a processing center, manipulating images, forming new combos.
Wow.
And what's cool is how it connects to the appetitive faculty.
Yeah.
We can desire things that we only imagine.
That's true.
Al-Farabi even gets into the biology of it.
Okay.
He says the heart is the main ruling organ.
Oh, interesting.
It's the source of vital heat
Okay.
and the principle of life.
Wow.
And the brain kind of moderates this heat.
Okay.
So physical grounding is key here.
Yeah. How do these psychic faculties actually work in the body?
Right.
And how does reproduction fit into this?
Okay, so following Aristotle, Al-Farabi says the female provides the matter.
Okay.
And the male provides the form.
Through the semen.
Yeah, exactly. He compares the semen to rennet.
Rennet?
Yeah, that stuff that makes milk curdle, suggesting that it carries the form of a human.
Right.
Which then interacts with the blood in the womb to start the development of organs.
Wow.
And guess what?
What?
The first organ is the heart.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So males and females share most organs and all those faculties of the soul.
Okay.
Sensitive, imaginative, rationale.
Yeah.
But they differ in their reproductive stuff.
Okay.
So we've got this layered understanding of the soul connected to the physical, but also with this unique capacity for rational thought. It's that rational faculty that really sets us apart.
Yeah, humans.
Right? So animals can sense and imagine, which lets them get around. But humans with the rational faculty can grasp intelligibles.
Intelligibles.
Yeah, those abstract concepts.
Yeah, fair.
Universal truths.
Yeah.
Principles of knowledge, sciences, arts.
Right.
We can also tell good from bad.
Yeah.
And think about our actions.
Okay, so we've got that level.
Yeah. And then within the rational faculty, there are 2 sides.
Okay.
The theoretical intellect, which is about necessary, unchanging truths.
Okay.
Like math axioms.
Yeah.
And then the practical intellect.
Okay.
Which deals with things we can act on.
Yeah.
Skills, decisions, moral judgment.
So you mentioned the imaginative faculty and how important it was.
It's a big deal.
What makes it so crucial in Al-Farabi's system?
Well, it's the bridge between our senses and our intellect.
Okay.
It takes what we sense and gives it to the rational faculty to process.
As images.
Yeah, as images and representations.
Okay.
But it also affects our appetites and emotions.
Okay.
Al-Farabi noticed that it's active even when we're sleeping.
Oh, yeah.
When the other faculties are resting, that's when it messes around with our sensory impressions.
Oh, wow.
And gives us dreams.
So dreams are like the imagination running wild.
Exactly. But he goes even further with this idea of reproductive imitation.
Reproductive imitation.
Or mimesis.
Yeah. Mimesis.
The imagination can imitate not just what we sense, but also intelligibles, desires, even bodily states.
Wow.
This is how it stirs up our emotions.
Oh, interesting.
And makes us act.
So this leads to some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
About prophecy and divination.
Totally.
How does the imagination play into that?
This is where the active intellect comes in.
Okay.
Al-Farabi says that in some people who have a really refined and receptive imaginative faculty, the active intellect can talk directly to it.
Oh, wow.
Bypassing the usual rational processing.
Wow. So it's like a direct line from pure intellect to sensory imagination.
Exactly. And it can happen when you're awake.
Okay.
But it's more common in sleep.
Oh, wow.
So Al-Farabi has this hierarchical view of prophetic vision.
Okay.
The highest form is when you directly apprehend events, present and future, and even perceive divine beings.
Okay.
All thanks to the active intellect.
Wow.
But a more common form is getting insights through dreams.
Yeah. Interesting.
Scholars even think he might have been influenced by Arabic texts.
Okay.
Like On Divination in Sleep.
Interesting.
Which talked about prophetic dreams coming from a universal intellect.
So the imagination isn't just for making stuff up. Right. It can be a way to higher knowledge.
Totally.
Let's talk about his doctrine on the intellect itself.
Okay.
It seems like he had a pretty nuanced view of what we mean by akul.
Yeah. In his treatise on the intellect.
Yeah.
Really breaks down the term. He looks at how it's used every day.
Yeah.
How Islamic theologians use it.
Okay.
And most importantly for him, how Aristotle used it.
Right.
So in everyday talk,
yeah,
akul often means practical reasoning.
Okay.
Like knowing right from wrong. Kind of like Aristotle's prudence.
Okay.
And Islamic theologians use it when they talk about God's commands.
Okay.
But Aristotle's usage is way more complex.
Got it.
So in the Post-Skerian analysis, akul is the faculty that grasps those necessary, true, universal premises.
Okay.
The foundation of all science.
Yeah.
These are things we just know.
Right.
Not from reasoning.
Like what?
The whole is greater than the part.
Okay.
And then Al-Farabi leans on Alexander Ephroditus
to
divide the intellect into 4 types.
Okay.
Potential, also called material or passive.
Yeah.
Actual acquired, and active or agent.
So let's break those down.
Okay.
What's the potential or material intellect?
That's our inborn ability to abstract forms from matter and receive intelligibles.
Okay.
It's like the mind's raw potential to understand, and this potential is realized.
Okay.
When we successfully abstract forms from our experiences, that's when it becomes the actual intellect.
Okay.
And at that stage, the actual intellect kind of becomes the intelligibles it understands. The knower and the known become one.
Wow.
And then how does the acquired intellect come about?
Yeah.
So when the actual intellect develops enough to grasp those forms without needing to refer back to concrete examples, that's when it becomes the acquired intellect.
Okay.
It's a big step.
Yeah.
Because now it can apprehend separate forms.
Separate forms.
Yes, things that exist without matter.
Okay.
With some help from the active intellect.
Okay.
It's like the peak of human intellect.
And then there's the active intellect.
Right. That's the key to it all.
Yeah.
So it exists eternally.
Okay.
Never embodied. And its job is to actualize the potential in our material intellect.
Okay.
And turn those sensory impressions into actual intelligibles.
Things we can understand.
Exactly. He uses an analogy from Aristotle. The sun and sight.
Oh, interesting.
Like the sun's light makes colors visible.
Yeah.
And even lets us see the sun itself.
Yeah.
The active intellect does the same for our minds.
Oh, wow.
It illuminates our material intellect.
Yeah.
Does this abstract forms.
Okay.
And even understand the active intellect itself.
So it's like our intellect is being guided by the active intellect. And that takes us from potential understanding to actual knowledge.
Right.
And eventually closer to the realm of the active intellect itself.
Yeah.
So what's the point of this whole intellectual journey?
For Al-Farabi, it's the highest form of human flourishing.
Okay.
And ultimate happiness.
Wow.
He believed that if you work at it, your acquired intellect can exist without your body after you die.
Wow.
It goes from material to eternal.
That's a big claim.
Yeah, but this part of his doctrine was debated later on.
By people.
Averroes, for example.
Okay, so we see this huge potential for transcendence.
Yeah.
Let's move on to his theory of scientific knowledge.
Sure.
How did he think about ilm?
Okay, so based on Aristotle's posterior analytics, he uses akul in another way.
Okay.
As the faculty that gives us certainty about those necessary, true, universal premises.
Yeah, the foundation of science.
Exactly. These are the self-evident truths that we grasp intuitively.
Not through deduction.
Right. So like the axiom, if equals are subtracted from equals, the remainders are equal.
Oh, okay.
So we have these starting points.
Yeah.
But how do we get to actual scientific knowledge?
Yeah.
Through developing our intellect with help from the active intellect. We cultivate the habit of knowledge and reach ilm or scientific knowledge.
So Al-Farabi's idea of science lines up with Aristotle's apodexis.
Right. Demonstrative certain knowledge like math and metaphysics, which is different from modern science with all the experiments and observations.
So for Al-Farabi, scientific knowledge is about being absolutely certain about the existence and nature of things.
Yeah. Things that exist independently of us.
Right.
And it's based on demonstrations.
Okay.
From those necessary premises.
And he breaks down scientific knowledge even further, right?
He does.
Okay.
He says there are two types.
Okay.
One where we know that something exists and why it exists.
Okay.
And another where we just know it exists, but not necessarily the reason.
Right. So the why versus just the what.
Exactly.
And the that. Right. And this idea of certainty.
Yakin.
Yakin.
Seems super important to his whole epistemology. Totally. So he sees logic, right, man, as the tool to get there when it's used correctly. Okay. And he lists the 5 logical arts: demonstration, dialectic, sophistry, rhetoric, and poetics.
Okay, so 5. Yeah. And which one leads to absolute certainty?
Only demonstration. Okay. Because it starts with those universal and necessary premises. Right. The other ones, like dialectic, just create belief or persuasion.
So we have different logical tools for different levels of certainty.
Exactly. But then he takes certainty a step further. Okay. Distinguishing it from absolute certainty. Right. So yakin is strong belief. Yeah. But al-yakin Allah.
Yeah, absolute certainty.
Needs way more.
Okay.
In his book on the conditions of certitude, he gives 6 criteria.
6?
For absolute certainty.
Wow.
You don't just believe something's true.
Okay.
It actually has to be true.
Right.
But you also have to know that it's true.
Yeah.
And know that you know it.
Okay.
That it can't be false.
Yeah.
That it will never be false. And that this is all true, essentially.
Okay.
Not just accidentally.
Those are some pretty tough standards.
They are.
For knowledge.
Yeah.
So those first few conditions kind of sound like the justified true belief idea in modern epistemology.
Right.
But he swaps out justification for knowledge, so you have to know that you know it.
Right.
That's like second-order knowledge.
Yeah, metacognition.
So the goal of science for him is to reach this absolute certainty.
Right, but he didn't dismiss other types of knowledge.
Okay.
Or the certainty you can get from other logical arts.
Okay, so Al-Farabi's thought is super interconnected.
It is.
His cosmology explains how he understands the soul with all its faculties. And the rational intellect is the key to higher knowledge. Yeah. And maybe even immortality.
Totally.
He really analyzed the imagination and its role in knowing.
And even prophecy.
Yeah. His doctrine of the intellect, with the potential and active intellect, explains how we move from not knowing to knowing. Yeah. And finally, his theory of scientific knowledge and his criteria for absolute certainty.
Based on logic.
Yeah. Show how committed he was to real understanding.
Yeah.
So Al-Farabi's work is really a bridge between Greek philosophy and the golden age of Islamic thought. And his ideas about the soul and knowledge.
Still relevant today.
Yeah, they really make you think.
Absolutely.
So one last thing for you to ponder.
Okay.
Al-Farabi stressed the active intellect as the source of our understanding.
Right.
But what does that say about intuition?
Okay.
Or those sudden insights? Yeah. Especially when he talks about those principles we grasp by nature.
Interesting.
Is there room in his system for aha moments that aren't about step-by-step reasoning?
That's a good question.
Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.